Brothers and sisters, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution. My name's Mark, and we're going through Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel. And as we go through this, we are seeing that we all need to be delivered from a spirit that's in our flesh. We all need to be delivered of this same spirit that was in Israel's flesh that they never overcome because they did not have Yahusha's spirit, because Yahusha had not come yet. But we're seeing in Ezekiel that Yahuah indeed divorced Israel. And rather than going on, I'm just going to get straight into this introduction because it will show where we've been and where we're going in this very exciting episode. We're doing 4 chapters today, and this is the crux. This is the real what's going to happen to the temple and why it's going to happen to the temple. Ezekiel chapter 8 to 11. After getting Ezekiel to illustrate and practically demonstrate just how much Israel has broken his heart with their idolatry, causing him to finally end them, Yahuah now takes Ezekiel on a virtual tour of the temple, supernaturally showing him, through visions, the reality of abominations going on in Jerusalem, and the reason he's going to withdraw his glory presence and destroy the whole place very shortly. Remember, as we go through this, we're not just doing a history lesson here. We are going into Ezekiel, which is a historic document, an old covenant book, but we've got to bring it forward to these temple bodies. Anytime you hear the temple being mentioned, it's secret code, and it's the only context we should be reading it in. Whenever you read the temple, it's talking about our bodies. So your little antenna should be going up going, oh, okay, temple, that's me. What's going on in my temple? What's happening in this temple? And compare. It's to teach us something about our bodily temples. And that's why we're reading Ezekiel, because it's all about the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the divorce of Israel. And because if you're not careful, there are people around you trying to tell you that Israel's still alive and kicking and she's still the bride. And you've got to graft into Israel and you've got to go back to the 10 Commandments. Or there's some people coming around these days saying you've got to go back earlier than that and go back into the covenant of Abraham, which is even further back than that, which is completely wacky and bizarre and insane if you ask me. So we've got to make sure we understand the context. Everything has to be transitioned spiritually into Yahusha Messiah, our only living Alahim, all right? That's why we're reading about the temple being destroyed, because the only temple we're interested in today and Yahusha's interested in is us. So read everything through this context. In the beginning, Ezekiel sees the glory of Yahuah at the temple in Jerusalem, and by the end of the vision, this mighty Shekinah presence will depart. The date is around 17th of December 592 BC, so just over a year after Ezekiel started getting visions. All right, so we're in chapter 8 now. It's been about a year since he's been getting these cosmic visions to do things. Remember, he had to lie on one side, lie on the other side, prophesy to the northern house, southern house, all these things we talked about in our last episode. Now he's going on a journey, supernaturally, in his mind, he's going to have a vision. Let's get into it. It's very exciting. Chapter 8. It came to be in the 6th year, in the 6th month, on the 5th of the month, as I sat in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me, that the hand of the Master Yahuah fell upon me there. So Ezekiel's, this isn't the kind of Babylonian captivity like the Egyptians had. They weren't making bricks. They weren't slave labor in Babylon. Some of them might have had it tough, but they were given houses and they had a whole different lifestyle. They were quite comfortable. And that's why 70 odd years later, after the prophecy ended, to go back, and they could go back to the promised land, most of them didn't. They were comfortable. They stayed in Egypt. They stayed in Babylon. Yeah, so it's Ezekiel's got a house here. He's got his own house, and he's a bit of an elder, a bit of a leader, because he's a prophet. He's getting visions from Yahuah. So people are talking to him. So he's sitting amongst the elders when the Master Yahuah fell upon me there. And I looked. I looked and I saw a likeness, imagery. I saw the likeness like the appearance of fire. From his waist and downward, the appearance was like fire, and from his waist and upward, the appearance of brightness like glowing metal. We saw this in chapter 1 of Ezekiel. And we've seen other prophets, Daniel and John, speak about their visions, seeing Yahusha, seeing Alahim, Yahuah in this way. And he stretched out the form of a hand. Here's another hand. Don't sit on the hand. He stretched out the hand, form of a hand, and took me by a lock of my hair. Picked him up by his hair. Wow. The elders sit before Ezekiel on numerous occasions, showing a combination of rejection and respect. The irony is that the esteem of Yahuah appears to Ezekiel in Babylon, where it shouldn't be, because where should the esteem be? In Jerusalem. And it takes him on a tour of the temple, where it should be. Ezekiel is having this vision of Jerusalem in the days when Jeremiah served as a prophet, in the period between the second invasion of the Babylonians and their final conquest of Jerusalem. If you're a bit rusty on that, go to our introductory video where we talked about all the different deportations. But Ezekiel's having these visions right when Jeremiah. And remember, we talked about one of the things Jeremiah said last episode about Yahuah handing Israel a certificate of divorce. So these prophecies are happening at the same time. Ezekiel did not physically leave Babylon, but was carried to Jerusalem in supernatural visions and taken through the 4 main areas of the temple, getting closer and closer to the most set-apart place each time, to see the detestable reality happening in this building that Ezekiel was preparing to spend his whole life serving in as a priest. Most commoners would just be happy to look at the temple from afar and just be in awe and just be like, this is our beacon, this is our status. We're Israelites in the promised land. This is Jerusalem. This is the temple. Wow. This is where we look to and pray to. But if you're a priest, you're a bit more interested in the fine details of the temple, the workings of the temple, what goes on in each room, and it's a bit different. So being a priest in training, Yahuah takes Ezekiel on a more detailed tour, knowing that Ezekiel understands what should be going on in each room and each section of the temple, and what's actually going on. So it takes him on a vision, takes him on a virtual tour. And this is what's going on in the temple court. This is just outside the temple. The brazen lava and all the big steps that go up to the new altar, big altar, is inside that door there. So they're outside the gate there. And the Spirit lifted me up between the earth and the heavens and brought me in visions of Alahim to Jerusalem, to the door of the north gate of the inner court. So this is the door of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the image of jealousy was, which causes jealousy. Now that may not be the exact idol that was standing there, but it's a pretty good replica, pretty good illustration. What is this image of jealousy which causes jealousy? It obviously causes Yahuah jealousy, because he says in his commandments, even in the 10 commandments, I am a jealous Al, visiting the crookedness of hundreds of generations. So do not bow to idols, in other words, because I'm a jealous Alahim. This image of jealousy is a reference to the statue of Asherah, erected by King Manasseh in the temple courts. You can see that in 2 Kings. It was later torn down by King Josiah, but then restored afterwards. This is the worship of the Queen of Heaven that Jeremiah speaks of. So Jeremiah's obviously seen this too. Ezekiel's seeing it now, and Jeremiah's seen it also, because Jeremiah speaks about the worship of the Queen of Heaven. And we'll go into that a bit later. So, and there's the same image, just zoomed out. So you can see there's that big altar, brazen altar, where the priest would walk up the steps. There's the big sea, they call it, I've forgotten the name of it now, the something sea, molten sea they call it. It's big big version of the brazen lava there. And this is just out here. They're the posts, Boaz and whatever the other one was called. So this is the side. We're looking at the side of the temple here. So this is just to the side here. They're all worshipping this idol. So contrast this abomination of jealousy with the Shekinah glory of Yahuah still in the temple. So the glory of Yahuah is still in the temple. Now, it wasn't, unlike the wilderness where the cloud and the fire was there all the time and they were following it. The presence was in the temple, but it wasn't visually there all the time. That's why they would often forget about him. It's not like it was hovering above the building. No, it shot through and it was inside the temple, and you weren't allowed to go in there unless you're the high priest once a year. But they couldn't visually, like they could in the wilderness, they couldn't visually see the fire all the time. And that's why they just chose to do other things. They forgot about him. So at this stage, the presence is still in the temple because we saw it go in visually when Solomon inaugurated it. That fire. So just have a look at the brilliance of this compared to what they're doing. Disgusting, isn't it? And we know that Alahim's still there because it says, see, the glory of the Alahim of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw in the plain. What did he see in the vision in the plain? He saw the wheels and the cherubim and all the flashing lights we did in chapter 1. He saw the fire and he saw Alahim there. Well, this presence is still in the temple, inside in the most set apart place. And he said to me, Son of man, lift your eyes toward the north. And I lifted my eyes toward northward and north of the altar gate and saw this image of jealousy in the entrance. That's right there in the entrance. Saw the image of jealousy in the entrance. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations which the house of Israel are doing here, driving me away from my set apart place, driving me away from my own house. David wanted to build me this house, and David did plan it, prepare it, stockpile all the ingredients and materials, and Solomon built it. This is his house. This is Yahuwah's house. See what they're doing, driving me away from my set apart place, and you're about to see even greater abominations. So then he brought me to the door of the court. I looked and saw a hole in the wall. And he said to me, Son of man, please dig into the wall. And when I dug into the wall, I saw a door. And he said to me, go in and see the evil abominations which they're doing right in my face. What are we going to see? What are we going to see? And I went in and looked and saw all kinds of creeping creatures, abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel carved all around on the walls. And facing them stood 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel, and in their midst stood Jaazaniah, the son of Jaazaniah, son of Shaphan. Each one had a censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. So they're praying. The pattern that was given to Moses and to David, to Solomon in this temple about the incense and praying, and the incense goes through the veil and the light, above the Ark of the Covenant lights. They're doing this to the idolatry. They've got incense. So and you can see all around the walls are all these creatures that they're worshipping. Some of them are images from Egyptian, some of them are images from Babylonian, the pantheon of deities, but it's all really, in today's dialogue, it's all zodiac, it's all this sort of stuff to make it easy, and they're still doing it today. You can see it there. So there they are, in there, worshipping, which is a complete spitting in his face. It's complete idolatry. And Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, all through where it's told, do not worship me like the pagans do. And what are they doing? You can see there, that looks like a bull or a lion or something. But they were worshipping all these creatures, and we know that. So, and he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark? This was good, this text. Have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each one in the room of his idols? Don't just look at this historically. Look at this to yourself. In the room of in this body temple, have you seen what they're doing in the dark? closed in their room where no one's watching, they think. Have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each one in the room of his idols, in the chambers of his imagery? Where's the chambers of your imagery? What do you dwell on and think about in those places where no one will ever know what you've been thinking about? What do you let go into your imagination and your thoughts that no one will ever know because they can't get into your mind? It alters your behaviour, but no one knows how you think. In the chambers of his imagery, don't you love the words? For they say, Yahuah doesn't see us. Yahuah has forsaken the land. But you'll see even greater abominations than what they're doing. In the room of his idols and hidden chambers of his imagery, in other words, perverted images and fantasies of the mind. There are 70 elders worshipping the animal carvings. Remember the 70 elders, that pattern? 70 elders ascended Sinai and saw Yahuah standing on the sapphire pavement. 70 elders stood at the tabernacle where Yahuah appeared before them. 70 elders always represented the people. So when you see 70 in the scriptures and 70 elders, whatnot, they are always representing the people. Even in Egypt, when Moses went to speak to the elders, speak to the 70 elders, they always represented the people. And later in history, they formed a Jewish Sanhedrin. In Yahusha's time, 70 Sanhedrin, 70 elders. Now look what these elders are doing and how they are steering the people. They believe Yahuah has abandoned his people, and so they pray to other deities. He's abandoned us. He sent all the 10 tribes north, packing to Assyria, and he's sent 2 waves now of deportations out. So he's left us, so we can do what we want. That's what they're thinking. He's not helping us, so we'll pray to other deities. But as Yahuah said, you'll see even greater abominations than what they're doing. Even greater than worshipping this. Look at this. And he brought me to the door of the north gate of the house of Yahuah, and I saw women sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, have you seen this, O son of man? But wait, you'll see even greater abominations than this coming up. And he brought me in the inner court of the house of Yahuah, and there at the door of the temple of Yahuah, between the porch and the altar, there were about 25 men with their backs towards the temple of Yahuah and their faces toward the east, and they were bowing themselves towards the sun. I don't think I have a picture right here. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Where's the temple again? All right, here's an illustration. I think they're standing somewhere around here. They're supposed to be facing the temple. They're facing with their backs to the temple, and whether it's here or here somewhere. Anyway, they're facing, see where the sun is? They've got their backs to the temple, and they're facing the sun. Are they worshipping who's in the temple, or are they worshipping the sun? And they've got their backs to Yahuah. Take all this in. This means something. They're bowing themselves eastward towards the sun. Yeah, they're bowing to the sun, worshipping the sun. This all comes from Babylon. All these stages of idolatry that we've been through so far all come from Babylon. At the death of Nimrod, at the hands of Noah's son Shem, we're going into history a little bit here to explain who Tammuz, what's the image of jealousy that they were bowing down to, the Asherah. What are they weeping? What are the women weeping for Tammuz? Who the hell's Tammuz? This all comes from Babylon. The sun worship, the priests bowing to the sun, all comes from Babylon. How? At the death of Nimrod, we're going back to the Tower of Babel here. At the death of Nimrod, after the Tower of Babel, at the hands of Noah's son Shem, Queen Semiramis, Nimrod's wife and mother, told the people she was pregnant with Nimrod's son Tammuz, who was also Nimrod, since he was the father of her child. She told them that Nimrod had gone into the heavens and was now the sun itself. The young Tammuz was to go into the groves and place a gift on a tree at the winter solstice as an offering to his father Nimrod, the sun god. So this Babylonian, this was the origin of all, the pantheon of deities and sun worship and everything came from Babylon, Mystery Babylon. Tammuz was worshipped as a pagan deity. The people believed that Nimrod had died and that he had become the sun. So as his son, as Nimrod's son, the sun god's son, Tammuz was worshipped as a pagan deity by a festival that was celebrated with weeping and fasting for 40 days. So that's why the women were in the temple courts weeping for Tammuz. They brought all that idolatry into the temple. And it's still today. That is where the Catholic tradition of Lent came from, for 40 days. Tammuz was killed in a boar hunt, and Semiramis ordered 40 days of fasting and weeping. In fact, this is the beginning of all pagan mythology. All pagan mythology comes from there. Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. How many? A father, a son, and a spirit, the Trinity. Or a father and a mother and if you're a Catholic thing. In fact, this is the beginning of all pagan mythology involving the mother and child that has continued to replicate itself throughout every pagan religion throughout history, culminating with the Queen of Heaven, and lives on through the false doctrine of the Trinity today. And you can see they still put the cross. That's not a cross, it's a T. It's weeping for Tammuz. So that's what they put the cross on there for. And that's where the cross that they say Jesus died on, it's not a cross, it's a T. It's not true. Messiah died, Yahusha died with his hands above his head. So the crosses and all this stuff is paganism. So, but that's interesting to know, happening in the temple, the paganism happening in the temple. But however, today, Satan has lunatics misdirecting and pointing at trees and wreaths and crosses and steeples, while he secretly controls their behavior through an abomination of desolation spirit in their flesh. That is the real idolatry, the self. So while people are telling you, you've got to stop doing those Christmas trees and you've got to stop putting those crosses and using the word cross, and he didn't die on a cross, while all that stuff might be true, while they're pointing at all those things, they're not telling you that there's a spirit in your flesh controlling you. And that is the real idolatry. So while you're all being offended by crosses and trees and steeples and wreaths and all these things, why don't you start being offended by yourself and your own behavior? Because that's the real behavior we're looking at going on in the temple, the fleshly temple. That's why we're reading this, because it's showing us what's going on in the temple and why it was destroyed. It hasn't been destroyed yet, but Yahuah is showing Ezekiel why he's going to destroy it. And it must be pretty extreme for Yahuah to have had enough. And remember, it's been about 1,000 years of this insanity going on. So don't lose sight of while we're reading this about the idolatry. It's the self. Yeah, it's great to know what Tammuz is. It's great to know the truth about Christmas and birthdays and Easter and all that stuff we don't do because it's stupid. But, the real idolatry is in ourself, all right? The flesh that has to die. Yahuah said to me, "Have you seen, O Son of Man? Is it a small matter to the house of Judah to do the abominations which they have done here?" Doesn't it mean anything to them? Is this just nothing to them that they're doing this? "For they have filled the land with violence and turned back to provoke me. And see, they are putting the branch to their nose. Therefore I will indeed deal in wrath." Putting the branch to their nose was part of the sun worship, the wreath, the holly, the worshipping of Tammuz, going into the groves and the Asherah and the putting a branch to your nose. It was all part of that worship. They put the branch to their nose. "Therefore I will indeed deal in wrath. My eye will not pardon, nor will I spare. And they will cry in my ears with a loud voice. But I will not hear." Idolatry in the Jerusalem temple. We can see it. The worshipping of the Asherah pole. Worshipping of the sun. Worshipping of the unclean creatures. The worshipping of Tammuz. 4 things, 4 sections of idolatry going on in this temple. This was the most grandest temple. Here's a good one. There you go. So all this is going on outside and around here, And then in the inner chambers with all the, they've put the little, all around the walls, all the idolatry around the walls. It's like going and spray painting it and graffitiing it. And this was the grandest temple. I think I looked the other day and saw, I think it was about 40 or 400, I forget, billion if it was in today's currency. The most expensive building you could have. It was all gold on the inside, all pure gold. And then all these other linings and cedar woods and oaks and silver and all this. 40 billion it would cost to build all this temple. And Solomon did it. And now look, and Yahuah loved it, and it was worthy of his presence. But alas, now, look what's going on. $40 billion, and where would he choose to live now? See how valuable our bodies are? There you go. It's all gold on the inside. Look at, see the people? That gives you a bit of an idea of the scale. So yeah, unlike the tabernacle, there are all these little secret chambers everywhere. Dressing rooms and, all these, for them, the priests to sleep in and other places. So in this vision, Ezekiel saw 4 abominations at the temple. 1, the outrageous idol of jealousy associated with the king. 2, the zodiac images and censers associated with the city leaders, the elders. The one outside was associated with the king. The king always dictates the way the nation goes. If it's a righteous king, he encourages righteousness in the nation. If it's an idolatrous king, which it was at this stage, it's encouraging idolatry. So we've got the king, then we go down to the elders, who are worshipping images all over the walls. Then we come to the women, the weeping of Tammuz, associated with the women, and then the worship of the sun god associated with the priests. So you can see all 4 areas are being completely, it's detestable. Eden, let's go back to the Garden of Eden for a moment. Eden was where heaven and earth connected, protected by cherubim. And now the covenant ark in Solomon's temple represented this connection once again, right down even to the cherubim. Unlike the tabernacle, which only had the ark in it, this little cube here had massive cherubim that touched, the wings touched, and the wings touched the sides of the chamber as well. See how little the ark is? That big thing they carried on their shoulders? That's down there. These big ass cherubim either side. So, and see the cherubim all around the walls and the palm trees. All this whole temple was representing the Garden of Eden. The last place, apart from the tabernacle and a couple of altars, where the presence of Yahuah was. So that's what it represented. But no matter how grandiose or lavish the structure, the aesthetics or the facade is, it can become an anti-Eden. Just like this temple has become. An upside-down nightmare world. Full of war. It is to you. It might not be to us, but it is to Yahuah. It's a nightmare to him. Look at him. Look what's going on in this place. This is my house. And look what they're doing. It's become an anti. It's the opposite of Eden. There's demons in there. Abominations, spirits in people's flesh reigning. This is an anti-Eden, just like in this temple. An upside-down, nightmarish world full of walking dead priests doing all sorts of abominable behavior right in Alahim's face. Even on the altars. And the altars were a place of surrender. A place where you would sacrifice and get forgiveness. Where's the altar today? The hearts. What's been taken over in 8 billion or so people today? The abomination of desolation sits on men and women's hearts today. It's not in a building somewhere. Yahusha doesn't care about buildings. It's about the temples of our heart. These bodies, these living dwellings, the hearts. On the altars, the place where we're supposed to surrender, sacrifice, seek forgiveness. See the disgusting adultery, hatred now being shown to Yahuah? Is it any different today? In these temples? Isn't it sad? If Yahusha says our bodies are now the temple, are we shining with his Shekinah glory or causing him to withdraw from his own house because of another spirit of abomination that we won't overcome? No matter what our fleshly body looks like on the outside, how grand was this temple? No matter how grand our fleshly body looks on the outside, this behavior within the set-apart temple illustrates for us just how we whore out our bodies which are designed to house Yahusha's presence. We whore out our bodies. We just give it anything. Get a thought and we go and do it. Yeah, great. Sounds fun. Lift it up. We get drawn and seduced into, yeah, why not? We just whore our body out, committing our time, adoration, passions, allegiance to cultural creations of our own making, economic or institutional, even distortions of Alahim's creation. For all of these pagan deities represent sex fertility. So when we're looking at these idols and the Asher and the Tammuz and all this, instead of pointing at it going, oh, we can't have trees, or we can't have Easter eggs, why don't you look at what they represent regarding your flesh? It represents the sexuality, fertility, what surrounds us today, sexuality, all that today. Sex, 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 money, sex, wealth, abundance, security, power, war all around us. All these deities represented some form of this. The crops, the fertility, sexuality, orgies, wine, love, all these deities represented all those things. Wealth, abundance, security, power, war. That's why they pray to all these things. Behaviors that are very much dominant still today. That's what you should be looking at. How is this affecting my body? Not that piece of gold or stone or silver sitting over there. Or don't have a statue in your house. Don't have a tree inside your house. Or don't bow down and worship it. What are you worshipping in your body? What spirit is controlling your flesh? See? Because if you're overcoming the spirit in your flesh, it's got nothing to do with Christmas or Easter or birthdays or Valentine's. It's got nothing to do with any of that, because you don't do that anyway, because you want to go further than that. You wouldn't be focusing on any of that stuff because it's fleshly. You're trying to put off all the flesh and keep going further. Leave all that stuff back there and go on. What spirit is controlling your flesh in your temple? See what Ezekiel's seeing in this temple? That's happening in all the temples today. Sadly, especially in even the temples that know Yahusha's name. Once you know Yahusha's name and you come into his reign, you are the bride. But half the brides are going to be stupid and foolish. So there's the temple again. So we saw a judgment going on already. Let's look in chapter 9 at the judgment of the people. And why. We've just seen why now. And this is the high-ranking people going on in Jerusalem, in the temple, doing this. And Yahuah called out in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, let the punishers of the city draw near, each with his weapon of destruction in his hand. And look, 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with his battle axe in his hand. And 1 man in their midst, which makes 7th, was clothed with linen and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. He's got a quill, a little feathery pen thing, and he's got an inkhorn there, which he keeps his ink in. And they came in and stood beside the brazen altar. So we know it's in the gate with the brazen altar with the steps going up to it. They came and stood beside the brazen altar, which is all about judgment. And the glorious steam of the Alahim of Israel went up from the cherubim where it had been to the threshold of the house. So we're talking about here. Where had the glory been? Above the cherubim. See here? This is where it was. You couldn't look into it like this. They've cut the side off so we can see into it. This was all enclosed. You couldn't look in here. There was a veil, big, metal. By this stage, it looked like a concertina door, doesn't it? But you couldn't look in here. Only the high priest could go once a year. So the hovering presence that was here is now starting to leave the temple. That's what's happening here. In words, the glorious steam of the Alahim of Israel went up from the cherubim, from the mercy seat, where it had been, to the threshold of the house. As final judgment and bloodshed defilement approaches Jerusalem, Yahuah is withdrawing his presence, shifting position away from the most set-apart place, above the Ark of the Covenant, with its cherubim to mercy seat, never to return. Very important that never to return. This light, this Shekinah glory, presence, never returns to any building, never returns to Israel again. Okay? And never will. Amazing, isn't it? And he called to the man clothed with linen who had the writer's inkhorn at his side. And Yahuah said to him, pass on into the midst of the city, into the midst of Jerusalem, and you will put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and cry over all the abominations that are done within it. So put a mark on those who are upset about these abominations. And to the others he said in my hearing, pass on into the city after him and smite. Do not let your eye pardon nor spare. Have no mercy, in other words. Slay to destruction old men, young men, maidens, children, women, but do not come near anyone upon whom is the mark and begins at my set apart place. So anyone with this mark, this is the same instructions Joshua was given when ordered to destroy the Canaanites when they first went into the land. The tragic irony is that Israel has become thoroughly Canaanized. They were supposed to be a shining light to the nations, and the nations have completely influenced them. They have become Canaanized. They've defiled the land and the temple, and so they suffer the same fate as what Joshua dished out on the Canaanites. Utter destruction. Have no mercy. Drive them out of my land, Yahuah said to Joshua. And now he's saying to these agents of death, in which in this case are the Babylonians, have no mercy. Drive them out. Except anyone who has the mark on them that's upset about this. So that's obviously going to be a small remnant of people. Because he's always got a few people. If you remember the hair he cut off and Ezekiel cut off and kept in his pocket, there's always a small remnant throughout history of people that they might be underground, but Yahuah's, or Alahim, Yahusha, is whispering to them things. He always keeps a small group of people that he wants to tell these truths to. He's destroying. This hasn't happened physically yet. Ezekiel's seeing what's about to happen. It happens in a few more chapters. So they began with the elders who were in the front of the house, and he said to them, defile the house and fill the courts with the slain. Go out. How would they defile the house? With blood. Because Yahuah hates human blood. He hates human blood. He can't be around death. Can't be around blood. He's the opposite because he's life. So they're defiling the house with all the blood. And they went out and smote in the city, and they were smiting them, and it came to be that I was left alone. All this drama's been going on. He's flying through the air on a virtual tour, and suddenly he's left alone. And I fell on my face and cried out. He's quite overwhelmed. Ezekiel said, Master Yahuah, are you destroying all the remnant of Israel in pouring out your wrath on Jerusalem? A bit like when Abraham was pleading with Yahuah, don't destroy Sodom. There might be some good people in there. And Yahuah said, well, if you can find 30, 20, 10, 5, and in the end he couldn't, so he destroyed it. So Ezekiel here is quite overwhelmed, going, are you going to destroy everybody? What about the good people? What about the remnant? Ezekiel pleads on behalf of the remnant, but Alahim's answer doesn't come until chapter 11, which we'll see a bit later. And he said to me, the crookedness of the house of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great, and the land is filled with bloodshed, and the city is filled with perverseness. Alahim sees everything. For they say, Yahuah has forsaken the land, and Yahuah is not seeing. Yahuah is telling Ezekiel this. This is what they're saying about me. They say Yahuah doesn't see anything. He doesn't see this. He's forsaken us. And we know that Yahuah is doing all this so that they'll wake up and come back to the covenant, and he'll let them back into land. No. But as for me, my eye will not pardon, nor will I spare. I shall recompense their deeds on their own head. And see, the man clothed with linen who had the inkhorn at his side reported back and said, I have done as you commanded me. This is all happening. And at the same time as captivity and judgment and destruction is coming, at the same time as that's happening, Yahuah is withdrawing. And I looked and saw in the space that was above the head of the cherubim like a sapphire stone. We're going to go through this quick because it's pretty much word for word like chapter 1. He's basically explaining once again the image of Alahim that he saw with the wheels and the sapphire pavement and sea of glass like crystal and all that sort of stuff, and the spinning wheels. And I looked and saw in the space that was above the head of the cherubim like a sapphire stone, having the appearance of the likeness, it's all imagery, of a throne. And he spoke to the man clothed with linen and said, "Go in among the wheels under the cherub and fill your hands with coals of fire from among the cherubim and scatter over the city." So he's taking the fire that Ezekiel saw in the presence of Yahuah. He's taking that fire, this angel cherub, taking this fire and scattering it over the city. And he went in before my eyes. And the cherubim were standing on the south side of the house when the man went in, and the cloud filled the inner court. All right, the cloud filled the inner court. And the glorious steam of Yahuah went up from the cherub over the threshold of the house. So the presence of Yahuah is withdrawing. It's starting from where it was in the ark, above the Ark of the Covenant in the most set apart place. It's going up and it's going out. Just like Ezekiel was flying in, seeing from this direction all the abominations happening, Yahuah is flying out towards the front of the temple, towards the threshold of the house. And the house was filled with the cloud, and the court was filled with the brightness of the esteem of Yahuah. Because remember, this didn't happen all the time. The people didn't see this presence all the time. Unlike the tabernacle in the wilderness, which had it there all the time for them, they didn't see it hovering above the temple all the time. And so this was a big deal for them to see. They had to extend their belief and know that he was in there, and the priests were to tell them that he was in there and bring in sacrifices. They weren't doing that. So this cloud filled the house, the brightness of the esteem of Yahuah. And the sound of the wings of the cherubim was heard in the outer court like the voice of El Shaddai when he speaks. And it came to be when he commanded the man clothed in linen, saying, "Take fire from among the wheels, from among the cherubim," that he went in and stood beside the wheel. And the cherub stretched out his hand from among the cherubim to the fire that was among the cherubim, and took some and put it into the hands of the man clothed with linen, and took it and went out. The fire at the center of the chariot provides the final burning of Jerusalem. This is the divine fire of judgment being poured out. The Babylonians are hitting him, but Yahuah is allowing it. And the form of a man's hand was seen under the wings of the cherubim. Another hand. A man's hand was seen under the wings of the cherubim. And I looked and saw 4 wheels beside the cherubim, 1 wheel beside each cherub, and the wheels appeared was like the colour of beryl stone. As for their appearance, all 4 looked alike, as if a wheel within the middle of a wheel. When they went on all their 4 sides. They did not turn aside where they went, but they went in the direction the head was facing. They're following the Spirit, remember? We saw in chapter 1. They did not turn aside when they went, and their entire bodies and their backs and their hands and their wings and the wheels that were all 4 had were covered with eyes all around. We're describing this creature here, which the Ark of the Covenant had the image on top of it, overstretched with the wings, and so did the temple in there. The wheels were called in my hearing. This one had wheels on it. See the wheels? These spinning wheels around the cherubim? The wheels turn one way and another way. The wheels had all eyes covered around it, and the wheels were called in my hearing Galgal. What on earth does Galgal mean? And that's just every translation says that. The wheels were called in my hearing Galgal. And we're just supposed to know what that means. Let's look up what Galgal means. There's a hint there. It's anything that's circular is a Galgal. Whirlwind, circular wind. It's anything that's circular. Hebrew understanding for Galgal. What does Galgal mean? Round. Something that is round or a second time around of in time or event. Interestingly, a dancing in a circle. Skull in English, or Greek, it's Golgotha. Who was killed at Golgotha? Outside the temple, just as Yahuah is leaving the temple and going out. Who was taken outside the temple and killed? Yahusha. Sounds like Yahusha. It also means a mound or pile of something such as rocks or a spring out of the ground. A wheel. This is what we're talking about. The wheels were called Galgal. Wheels, the wheel of a cart or a whirlwind. Wheel, heaven, rolling thing, whirlwind. This This would probably be one of the most accurate things going on, because this is what Ezekiel's seeing, a whirlwind and fire and lightning and, brass and, a skull. That's where the Golgotha bit comes in, place of the skull. The roundness of the head or skull, circular. Also a census by the counting of heads. Something round, a round thing, something round such as stones or dung. Yahusha was treated like dung outside the temple, wasn't he, at Golgotha? Grape, the harvested round grapes. He was pressed like grapes in the wine press, the great wine press, they call that too. Great place of pressure. That's Gethsemane, place of, Redeemed, the buying back, a bringing back around of something or something, which is what Yahusha did. Sounds like Yahusha. Understanding for 𝗪𝗪𝗪𝗪. So good to know what that means, because right in the middle of this, we're just told the wheels were called 𝗪𝗪𝗪. Let's go on. Take this. If remember, we're talking all about our physical, human, fleshly temples. And each one had 4 faces. The first face was the face of a cherub, second the face of a man, third the face of a lion, fourth the face of an eagle. And the cherub were lifted up, and it was just like the creature I saw by the river Chebar back in chapter 1. And when the cherub went, the wheels went beside them. And when the cherub lifted up their wings to rise up from the earth, the same wheels also did not turn from beside them. When they stood still, the wheels stood still. When one was lifted up, the other lifted itself up, for the spirit of the living creature was in them. They're following the spirit. These creatures are in sync with Alahim, remember? Because above it is the throne. And the glorious esteem of Yahuah went from the threshold of the house. So the esteem, which was in the most set apart place, is going back into this scene here. It was over here, and now it's going into this scene here with all the wheels and everything. The glorious esteem of Yahuah went from the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. So this vision that he's seeing in the sky, the glory cloud is going and joining it, and the throne is seated, which was in the temple, is now seated up in the sky above. See it there? There. And the cherubim lifted up their wings and rose from the earth before my eyes. When they went out, the wheels were beside them, and it stood at the door of the east gate of the house of Yahuah, and the glorious esteem of the Alahim of Israel was above them. Yahuah's presence moves to the entrance of the temple and prepares for takeoff. It was the living creature I saw under the Alahim of Israel by the river Chebar, and I knew they were cherubim. Chapter 1, he just calls them living beings. But he's realizing, he's been thinking about this for the last year or so, and when he sees them again, he's like, yeah, they're cherubim, mate. Yeah, they're cherubim. I knew they were cherubim. Each one had 4 faces, and each one had 4 wings, the likeness of the hands of a man under the wings, and the likeness of the face was the same as the faces which I saw by the river Chebar, their appearance and themselves. Each one went straight forward. So it's gone from the mercy seat. The presence has left the mercy seat. So when the mercy's gone, what's left? Judgment. And judgment is coming, because the one who gives the mercy is gone. Remember in the time of Samuel, when the ark was stolen by the Philistines, and this word was cried out, Ichabod, Ichabod, Ichabod. In other words, the esteem has gone, or Yahusha's buggered off. So this is what happens when Yahusha buggers off. Ezekiel 11, judgment of the city. Don't forget, we don't want to be in this state. You don't want to be walking around a temple and Yahusha's not there. And we're going to look at that. Let's look at our last chapter. The Spirit lifted me up and brought me to the east gate of the house of Yahuah. Remember, Yahuah hasn't left the temple yet. He's still hovering, ready for takeoff. That's where we're up to. Hovering at the front there. He's worked his way to the front and he's waiting for takeoff. And the Spirit lifted me up and brought me to the east gate of the house of Yahuah, which faces east. And see, at the door of the gate were 25 men, among whom I saw Jaazaniah, the son of Azur, and Pelatiah, the son of Benaiah, heads of the people. And he said to me, Son of man, these are the men who plot wickedness and give evil counsel in this city, who are saying, the end is not near. Let us build houses. After everything that's gone on, second wave of deportations happened. We're not going to be judged. We're fine, mate. Let's start building houses again. This city is the cooking pot, and we are the meat. Therefore prophesy against them. Prophesy, O Son of Man. Go on, speak against them. And the Spirit of Yahuah fell upon me and said to me, speak this. Yahuah knows everything that you have said, O house of Israel, for I know what you think and what comes up in your spirit. No matter what's going on, he knows what you think, what comes up in your spirit. You have increased your slain in this city and filled its streets with blood. Therefore the Master Yahuah says, your slain whom you have laid in its midst, they are the meat. They are the meat, and this city is the cooking pot. But I shall bring you out of the midst of it. You have feared the sword, and I bring a sword upon you, declares the Master Yahuah. And I shall bring you out of its midst and give you into the hand of strangers and execute judgments on you. By the sword you fall. At the borders of Israel I judge you, and you shall know that I am Yahuah. This city is not your cooking pot, nor are you the meat in its midst. At the border of Israel I judge you, and you shall know that I am Yahuah. For you haven't walked in my laws, nor executed my right rulings, but have done according to the rulings of the nations all around you. What's all this talk about meat and pots? Jerusalem is the pot. Why? It's imagery. Remember, he's seeing visions. It's imagery. Jerusalem is the pot. It's an image of protection behind the iron walls. The line when they say, we are the meat, Jerusalem's current inhabitants are the choice meat. Because they're stuck up, they're up themselves. They think they're the protected ones because everyone else has been taken. They're the choice meat. It's about the status of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Choice meat was cooked in pots, while lesser cuts of meat were cooked on open coals. So they're the hoity-toity meat in the pot. They're saying, we are the meat in the pot. The implication is that the bad cuts have been removed from the pot already, the exiled leaders leaving only the choicest cuts. So see their arrogance? And Yahuwah is saying, your judgment and your abomination is the meat. You are the meat. This is the pot. This is what's going on. And you're going to be kicked out of all of it. You're getting out of this pot. I'm boiling you all up and kicking you out, spewing you all out. And this is what's going to happen very shortly. Remember, this is before the fact. Ezekiel's seeing visions, but it's going to become a reality by about chapter 24, all right, which is midway through. The whole point of this book of Ezekiel is this event, the divorce and destruction of Israel. And it came to be while I was prophesying that 𝗪𝗪 the son of Benaiah died, and I fell on my face and cried out with a loud voice and said, Master Yahuah, are you making an end of the remnant of Israel? There's that question again. He's crying out. He's devastated, watching people die left, right, and center. Are you going to kill off everybody, Master? What's going on? Are you going to save anybody here? What about the good people? Will there be any survivors to receive the covenant promises? Because that's what the obedient ones were looking for. That's why they obeyed the covenant, the obedient ones, which there weren't many of them, because of the promises given to Abraham, Moses, all the things that's fulfilled in Yahusha. They were looking for the promises. Are you going to save anybody? And Yahuwah replies, the word of Yahuwah came to me saying, Son of man, your brothers, your relatives, your kinsmen, and all the house of Israel, all of it, are those about whom the inhabitants of Jerusalem said, keep far from Yahuwah. Look what they're saying about him. Keep far from Yahuwah, for this land has been given to us as a possession. Therefore, say the Master Yahuwah says, although I have sent far off among the nations, and although I have scattered them among the lands, yet I was for them a set-apart place for a little while, in the lands to which they came. Therefore say, the Master Yahuwah says, I shall gather you from the peoples, and I shall assemble you from the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Israel. So he's telling them they can come back. He's telling them they can come back into covenant. And they shall go there, and they shall take away all of its disgusting things, take away all of its abominations from there. And how is this going to happen? I will give them one heart, put a new spirit within you. I will take away the stony heart out of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh, so that they walk in my laws and guard my right rulings and will do them. And they will be my people, and I will be their Alahim. But to those whose hearts walk after the heart of their disgusting things and their abominations, I shall recompense their deeds on their own heads, declares the Master Yahuah. So people read these scriptures and go, oh, he's going to bring them back. He's going to bring them back. How is he going to bring the people back into his covenant? To start with, it's all about the heart. It's not about stony tablets. It's not about old covenants, not about old historic documents. It's about a new covenant, which is the altar of our hearts, because the temple is a living temple with an altar, a heart altar, and a new heart and a new spirit, which he gives us when we receive his spirit. We call it a baptism of spirit. He gives us a down payment, a portion of his spirit. So why is that important? Because he's not bringing us back into an old covenant or an old covenant promised land. He's not bringing us back into a Hebrew covenant, into a Hebrew promised land promised to Abraham. None of the promises to Abraham are relevant. They were fulfilled in Yahusha. Promises given to Moses, fulfilled in Yahusha. Promises given to David, fulfilled in Yahusha. The promised land is the hearts. Of course, there's a promised land coming from the clouds, a new heaven, a new earth. But at this stage, the promised land, the divine set-apart real estate that Alahim Yahusha is only interested in, is us. And you can see the timeline from the tabernacle to the temple. And now the promised land is our hearts. All right? New heart, new spirit. That's how he's going to bring them back. All the covenant promises are going to be fulfilled that he's giving Ezekiel all these breadcrumbs. They're going to be fulfilled in Yahusha, of course. Notice there are no calls to repent in all this. Ezekiel's not telling people to repent, not at this stage. For the future judgment is certain, but so is the promise of hope for a small remnant. A small remnant will make it back, will make it through. But how? They've got to be transformed, transitioned, because all of this that we're talking about is natural, earthly, national, carnal. This small remnant is going to be transformed into the spiritual reign. They're going to see it. Israel has broken the everlasting covenant, therefore it is null and void. Alahim has not abandoned his promises, but he has divorced and left them. So any future hope will depend entirely on Yahuah's initiative to leave his throne, transform himself into a man, and usher in a new covenant order, a fulfillment of every old covenant sign, promise, Torah, giving his people a new heart and spirit in order to make them spiritual heirs of his promises. No more do we look to the forefathers of the old covenant order and their fleshly signs and shadows. For we look to Yahusha Alahim, who baptizes us in spirit and fire, in order to prepare and clothe us in every way, ready for his return. So you can see now, and we're going to see in this last short paragraph, that he's going to take off. He's hovering around here and he's going to take off to the Mount of Olives. The glory has gone. Ichabod. He's buggered off, mate. And the cherubim lifted up their wings, the wheels beside them, and the esteem of the Alahim of Israel was high above them. And the esteem of Yahuah went up from the midst of the city and stood upon the mountain which is on the east side of the city, the Mount of Olives. And the Spirit lifted me up and brought me in a vision by the Spirit of Alahim into Chaldea, which is Babylon, to those in exile. And the vision that I had seen went up with me, and I spoke to those in exile all the words which Yahuah had shown me there. So he's gone. Yahuah has gone. Yahuah has left the building. He started here, he moved to the threshold, moved to out here, and then he moved further out here to out into the city, and then he's gone. Never to return. The point here is Ezekiel's vision proves the end of the old covenant worship order. In case you weren't privy to that while we're going through it, in case it didn't click with you, everything we just read in these 4 chapters is proof. The end of the old covenant worship order. Because the only point of this whole worship order, starting with Abraham and the altars and Isaac and Jacob and the 12 tribes, altars, and then they came to the mountain, Sinai, the tabernacle, all this was to achieve the presence of Yahuah among them. Then it got grander and bigger in the Temple of Solomon. And what have we just seen? Ichabod, presence is gone. So what is the point of the temple, the city, the priesthood, the sacrifices, the blood, the animals? What is the point of any of it if the presence is gone? The only point of it. The promised land was for the city, and the city for a temple. The temple was to house the glory presence of Yahuah. All priests and sacrifices were to maintain the glory. The candlestick, the bread, all this was to be done exactly to the pattern that I gave Moses, exactly to the pattern I gave David, exactly to the pattern. All the priests and sacrifices to maintain the glory. The covenant is broken. Abomination now reigns. They're not keeping the covenant. It was an everlasting covenant, but they broke it. So the glory's gone. The glory has gone. Shortly, the temple and Jerusalem are gone too. Yahuah divorced Israel. Yahuah punished Israel. It's gone. Most of them don't come back. Most of the Jews don't even come back. They get assimilated into, the nations as well. Even after 70 years of captivity, most of them don't come back. They don't want to. They're comfortable out there in their synagogues. Yahuah has gone. This is very important. Yahuah has gone. He never comes back. As it says there, he whispers to a few people and prophets here and there. He never comes back. But there is going to be a new covenant and new covenant behavior. Yahuah never returns to Israel again. This is serious. Yahuah never returns to Israel again. For the next 500 years, from Ezekiel to the time Yahusha arrives, it's about 500 years. For the next 500 years, everything that transpires with the Jews is merely to set the stage for the new covenant order through Yahusha Messiah, our Alahim. Even when they go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, it's not as good. The young people are rejoicing and the old people are weeping because there's nothing like Solomon's temple. The presence never went back in there. The presence never returned. Yahuah never returned to Israel and never will. It's only to set the stage. The temple, Herod took over and made it grander and bigger, and so Yahusha could bring a new covenant order through Yahusha Messiah Alahim. Alahim is one, the throne is one. Yahusha sits on it in all authority. Yahuah has gone. Yahuah now has a new name and a new being. He transformed into flesh and blood for us. His name is Yahusha. That is the new name that no one knows, apparently. It's the new name in Revelation. All dominion, power, and authority over creation belongs to the deliverer. This is Yahusha. Now that man there is not Yahusha, so don't comment on the picture and tell me he's got white skin. That's not Yahusha. That's just a man with Yahusha's name written on his forehead. All right? Because last time I posted that picture in something, everybody went up in arms. Yahusha was black. Israel is divorced. Got it? Israel is divorced. Yahuah has gone. Yahusha's new covenant bride only finds eternal life. Remember that remnant Ezekiel was asking about and devastated? How are you going to... What was the point of all this? What was the point of all this if you're going to destroy everybody? There'll be a remnant. But the only way the bride, which is the remnant, Yahusha's new covenant bride, only finds eternal life through his narrow gate vein of deliverance. Narrow gate. It's hidden. Of deliverance. A baptism of spirit and fire. That baptism of spirit is when he said to Ezekiel, I give you a new heart, a new spirit. It's no longer about stones and tablets and commandments. I'm going to write them. He's going to write his commandments. And Yahusha only gave 2 commandments. A summary of all the Torah and prophets. A summary of all the covenants combined into a new covenant. Love Yahuah, your Alahim, with all your heart, mind, body, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. They are the 2 royal laws. That is the baptism of spirit. And then he's going to put us through the fire. A baptism of fire to mature the new living temples into the 2 royal laws of love and the fruits of righteousness. Very important that everything we read in Scripture, we're looking at it like this. We are the new living dwellings. And everything that was going on in that Temple of Solomon towards the end is happening in everybody's temples today. So don't be crying at the trees and crying at the Christmas trees and the wreaths and the holly and all that sort of stuff at this time of year. Look at yourself. Look in the mirror and go, where's the paganism? Where's the idolatry in me? Am I arresting every single thought? Am I giving over completely to Yahusha? Do I even believe Yahusha is Alahim? Have I been baptized in his spirit? Have I been through the fire? Because if you've gone through the fire, you're sold over. You don't do things wrong. You don't sin. Because you've been through the fire. You've got fear. You don't want to do things wrong. All other old covenants and Torahs are a dead Hebrew shadow carcass. Anybody peddling them, these lying, walking corpses that are still peddling all this old stuff back, they're peddling laws from Noah, the Noahic laws. They're peddling stuff from Abrahamic laws. They're peddling stuff from Moses. They're peddling stuff from anybody taking you backwards in time to old covenants and Torahs. Dead Hebrew shadow carcass. That's what you'll end up, walking dead like they are. They got no love and they got no joy. They're full of accusation, condescension, and wickedness. Wicked, brood of vipers, full of dead men's bones, whitewashed tombs. Lying, walking corpses. Because Yahusha is Alahim. Yahuah has gone. And we saw it. We saw him leave the building in such a grandiose, spectacular way. He can't have anything to do with what was going on in that temple. And just in case there was any confusion, he took Ezekiel on a very detailed tour. And he took us with him because Ezekiel wrote it all down. That's what's happening in every temple today. All the idolatry and all the things that all those idols represented are happening each and every day in all of our vessels. Unless we've decided to say, no, I believe Yahusha is Alahim. I believe that he is the narrow gate. He's knocking on my heart. I can feel his Alahim. I want you, Yahusha. I want you to come in and sup with me. I want to enter this spiritual reign. There's nothing in this world that satisfies me. It's a spiritual reign. It's a new covenant order. And Yahusha wants to come in, baptize you with spirit, baptize you with fire to prepare you. It's a cauldron. It's pain. Hebrews 12, read it. Chastises, rebukes, flogs, disciplines us so that we will produce the peaceable fruits of righteousness, love, joy, peace, patience. That is the only behavior acceptable, the only worship pattern acceptable in this new covenant order of these new covenant temples. See you later, brothers and sisters. We'll be back soon.